You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined by Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, like I always am on Friday, although we won't next Friday because I'm on vacation. But this Friday, he is here. And before we get started, I do want to let you know, LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Doing very well, sir. It is the middle of recruiting now, man. We're in the thick of it, and the commitments are starting to come in.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, for instance, I think that most schools would really have liked if the June signing period would have happened and they could have just locked down half of their class at the end of June. Because waiting until December is going to be at least problematic because there's schools that are recruiting teams that has to win games. If they have a bad season, that could be affecting it. I'm telling you, this June National Signing Day, when it happens, whether it be next year or the year after, is going to be a game changer in high school recruiting.
Yeah, it'll change the way people do business because they're tired of chasing kids for as long as they do. It'll make it easier for the coaches. More coaching, less dealing with 17-year-olds.
Yeah, and honestly, that's always a good thing because everybody was making, like, there was a picture on Twitter that went around of Elijah Drinkwitz playing guitar in an official visit video.
Oh, God.
And last year we saw the Brian Kelly video on his official visit looking absolutely weird, looking like he was like booty dancing a prospect. But this is the thing. Coaching football, especially college football, yes, you have to know ball. You have to understand what you're seeing, but there's lots of coaches that can do that. To be a head coach, you also have to check your shame at the door.
Unfortunately, you see a lot of goofy things like that with these videos with kids. I've kind of grown to the point where I ignore them. It's sad, but it is what it is, man.
Yeah. And we get on the Ole Miss recruiting. TJ Hedrick committed to Ole Miss over the weekend. He's from Naples, Florida. I think he also maybe transferred to Naples from Columbia, Missouri, because if you look at his profile,
I saw that.
Yeah, there's like a weird thing. But when you see TJ Hedrick's video, this is what I got for him when I looked at his huddle film. All of the bend and the movement, you can see why he has all the Power 5 offers that he has. But whenever he's lining up on the other side of the ball and there's a 215-pound defensive end lining up there, you can see also why he's a 3-star at the moment. Because my theory on this is scouts need to see him play somebody. They need him to get into an all-star game. And he is a guy that has a chance to, because of all of the physical tools, go really high up the rankings really quickly, because all that needs to happen is they just need to see it.
Yeah, he plays in Naples. That's not exactly the beacon for the state of Florida. And when it comes to recruiting, they got some good players, but it's the last stop before you hit Alligator Alley. And then you go across the state to Fort Lauderdale, Miami. So not a lot of people scout that area. And it's okay in terms of talent by Florida standard, but it's not elite. And he's running over most kids he's playing against. That is a powerful, powerful kid. I don't think he's super twitchy, but I think he'll be an SEC guard and be really good, maybe be a right tackle in time. But when he gets hands-on, it's over. And a few of those kids went for long rides, very long rides. So his film is entertaining in that regard.
Yeah, you look at his film and the scene from The Blind Side. Is this an old podcast? Yeah, it takes. They literally do that. He just carries the guy under the sideline. It's like that had happened in real life.
I don't think there are many high school kids that can handle 300-pound offensive linemen, and Hedrick's just another example of it. That's just grown man strength playing with people that aren't old enough to vote, and it's not very pretty.
How often do they play schools from around Fort Lauderdale and the Miami schools and things like that?
Not very often. The difference in talent is massive. Usually, when the Naples schools go across, they get obliterated. It's the speed difference on defense and the depth is usually pretty massive.
Yeah, I saw in the highlight film whenever he was going, it looked like he played First Baptist Academy. That's Winston Watkins' school up the road. I guess he's at Fort Myers. So maybe Naples and Fort Myers and all that little Southwest Florida corridor are the ones that they just kind of stick together.
They usually try to do it for money. It's not as difficult to travel within an hour of each other. Absolutely.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back, we're going to talk to Brian Smith about his scouting process. And for instance, what does a 2027 kid need to do to be noticed, and carry that all the way through until signing? We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I do want to let you know, Gametime is your place for NBA Finals tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. That lowest price guarantee and events cancellation protection and job loss protection is a part of a suite of things that makes Gametime one of the best customer service ticket apps out there. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Download Locked On Sports today and see. It brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Brian, I had a comment on one of my shows that just said, hey, can you ask the Florida football scout his scouting process? And that got me thinking a little bit. And let's say you're a 2026 or a 2027 guy that is trying to get on the radar. How does that look from your perspective, from identifying these kids to actually deciding who you follow to ended up being Power 5 or whatever?
There's several ways it can begin, but if it's organically, it's because of the coaches I speak with at the 7-on level, trainers and high school guys. They'll tell you who the kids are that are committed to the craft of being a football player, which is a year-round endeavor, as you well know, Stephen. And it's also a bunch of guys that get out on the road. Sometimes you just see a kid, you're like, who is that guy? You know, why is he not being talked about? And if he's at a school like you're familiar with this in Mississippi, some of these schools don't get anybody to come by because they're just Podunkville. It's not easy for scouts to get there. So when you see another team you don't normally do, you try to pay attention. You go back over the film and watch. Those are the main ways. And of course, there'll be somebody else that'll run across something and put out their own list. You'll see some of that too. But it's usually organic and just talking to your buddies in the industry.
So there is a cornerback from Lake Cormorant we talked about off air coming into this. I forget his name, like Radar Jones or something like that.
We call him DD Daniels. Yeah. Bavarian. Yeah. DD Daniels.
And he is getting ready to do a ton of visits. He's from the prospect end. He's doing everything that should happen. He's visiting UNLV, Miami, all of that stuff, which, by the way, if you're a prospect that's 2026, 2027, 2028, and you can visit UNLV in Miami, I think every kid should do that. But just to enjoy the recruiting process that's there. On their end, what do they need to do to get your attention?
I think more than anything else, it's being very social media savvy, how you communicate with people. I get inboxes constantly from kids. Hey, look at my film. What can I do to get better? Can you contact a coach for whatever it may be? How you communicate, the film you put out on social media, your huddle highlights or your YouTube highlights, whatever, the more professional it is, the better. Put your best 5 clips first. Understand what the first things that a coach looks for, like ask.
No
What are you looking
dissolves. No
Yeah.
dissolves. Leave those off.
That's right. Make sure that you find out what you need to do. Put that at the beginning of your film. And then finally, it's doing what Didi's doing. Let's go to camps. I saw him at OT7, and when he walked out on the field for Coastline Stars, I immediately went, who's that guy? He looked a little different. He's a little more physically mature than some of the other guys his grade. He's a big corner and has length, and he's a playmaker. But at the same time, not everybody's as gifted as Didi natural. Like he looks like a college corner now. He's got 2 years of high school left. Go to camps, man. There's no way around it. These mega camps, some of these guys end up at Florida State and Ole Miss and LSU that started out at that, and their name gets out. That's probably the first thing. And then, of course, individual workouts with the college coaches. When it gets down to the final, hey, am I getting an offer or not? You get pulled to the side. They run you through some rigorous things. Mm-hmm. How you doing that 5-10 minute stretch? Honest to God, can be the difference on whether or not you go. Maybe if it's quarterback, it's a little longer, but like most of it is agility stuff and how well you take coaching. They want to know if they can work with you directly. So got to get to the camps, brother.
Yeah. TJ Hedrick, the player out of Naples, I guarantee you he went through one of those 10-minute cycles on his official visit at Ole Miss. Oh. And that was the point where the offer went out and he was ready to go.
They're not going to take a kid in the Southeastern Conference level unless they, at some point he did it, whether it was at their camp, the visit, whatever. You're going to see what he does when you ask him a tough question on how you take on a certain front or do different things. How advanced is he? You need to know that. It's a big deal.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, what have you got going on as we close this June?
Trying to figure out the dates for which kids are committing when. I've got some dates on some kids, some public, some not, but we're about to go through a just palooza of verbal commitments across the SEC and beyond. In the next 2 weeks, it will be incredible. And then through just a little bit of July, some kids will commit around July 4th, kind of make it a celebration. But this is the heaviest recruiting 2-3 weeks of the year.
Should be interesting. Anyway, thank you for coming on the show, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care, sir.